All right. Hello, everybody. Hi, I'm Nicholas Thompson. I am CEO of The Atlantic. I will be your moderator. I hope you have all enjoyed your tofu teriyaki. You got your selfies down on the field, and you are ready to talk about trust and AI, because we are going to talk about the banger of a report that came out, some of the counterintuitive findings, some of the surprises, some of the debates, some of the arguments. Ideally, by the end of this conversation, you will have found some interesting and useful things that will help your business unlock more from AI. So let me introduce the fine folks on stage, and then let's get talking. On the left, Brian Harris, CTO at SAS. How are you, Brian?
How you doing? Great to be here.
Good. You look sharp. I like that collar a lot.
Thank you.
Kathy Lang, Research Director for AI and Automation Practices at IDC, helped to make this report. Hi, Kathy.
Yes. Very excited to be here and talk to you about it.
And Preeti Shivpuri, with whom I had the tofu teriyaki at lunch, had a lovely time. Trustworthy AI and data lead at Deloitte. How are you, Preeti?
Lovely. Lovely to be here with all of you. Thanks, Nick.
All right, great. So we will get cracking, and let's start with Kathy. Since you helped write this report and you know a lot about this report, what's in the report? Get us started, and then we can start to pick away at it.
Okay. So we surveyed about 2,400 respondents with this global survey across industries, across geographies. We looked at both IT and line of business to survey, and we surveyed about AI and data. But specifically, we talked about machine learning, or traditional AI, as we call it, generative AI, agentic AI, and quantum AI. And so one of the first things that we looked at was adoption, usage of the technology. So in this survey, we had 81% of the respondents using generative AI. And if we looked at how much they plan to use it in the next 12 to 24 months, that would almost be 100%. Second up was traditional AI, machine learning. 66% are using traditional machine learning. 52% are using agentic AI, and 30% are using quantum AI. Okay, so think about that. First of all, it took us 30 to 40 years to get 66% of people using traditional AI. It took us 3 years to get 81%, or close to 100%, if we look at the 12 to 18 months, using generative AI. That is a huge statistic there. It's amazing, right? How quickly are organizations adopting generative AI? But the survey actually isn't about adoption. I mean, that was one of the findings. But the survey is really about trust. Trust in AI, trust in data, trust in AI, and how tightly coupled data and AI and trust are for driving ROI, business value, right? So there's really two kinds of dimensions of trust. One is, how inherently do I trust the technology? Do I trust that it's accurate, that it's reliable, that it's repeatable, and that it's transparent? So how much do I trust the technology? And then the second dimension of that is, how trustworthy should it be, right? Is it worthy of my trust? Okay? So those are two very different things. And so when we break that down, it says that, the report says that people trust generative AI more than they trust traditional AI and machine learning. Almost 3 times more, in fact. Which, as a statistician, I think is crazy. That is a crazy statistic, because guess what? Inherently, generative AI is not as trustworthy as traditional machine learning. First of all, if you ask a generative AI chatbot, for instance, a question, and you ask it the same question again, you're likely to get different answers. So it's not trustworthy in that sense, right? We are not getting the same answer over and over again. And generative AI is prone to hallucinations. Hallucinations are errors, right? They're errors. So again, not really trustworthy. Third, we don't know what's going on inside these deep learning models. We know the inputs and we know the outputs, but what's happening in between? Even the developers don't really know what's going on there. And fourth, we don't know what data these models are trained on, right? So, it could be bad quality data, it could be PII, we don't know where it's coming from, is it complete? All of those things about data are not making that trustworthy. So the perception that Gen AI is more trustworthy or they should trust in it more is just crazy. Right? So let's break that down a little bit more. So we know from the study that if we have high trust in Gen AI, and we've put in the investment to make it trustworthy, we've put these guardrails around it to make it trustworthy. So we've invested enough and we've put the guardrails around it to make it trustworthy. Then that's the ideal spot. And we see that 9% of the respondents are in that ideal position where they trust it and they should be trusting it because they've put the guardrails around it. Okay, 9%. Now, 11% more have put all the guardrails around it, but they're not utilizing it. So they still don't trust it. They still don't trust it. Okay, so they're underutilizing the technology even though they've put the investment in. So that is a trust dilemma. There's a gap between the perception and the reality there. And then if you flip that over to the other side of the matrix, it says 35% of organizations trust Gen AI even though they haven't put in the guardrails around it, so it's not trustworthy. So the trust gap is that 11% that has the gap and the 35% that's got the gap. And then we had 9% of those in the ideal spot. That leaves 45% in a spot that is, okay, I don't trust it and I haven't put the investment in it. Those guys are in a real bad spot. But we're in those other two where there's this gap, they just need to make some adjustments to move into that spot where the ideal spot where we know that people are getting higher ROI on their investments. So there's tons of information in this report. I'm going to stop there, and I'm really excited to see what other people think about that.
So maybe we should do an audience show of hands. Who has built trustworthy AI but doesn't trust it, and who trusts really crappy AI? Just kidding. All right.
I was going to say that Kathy's statistician was showing, so nice work. Very nice.
I know.
All right, so Brian, what surprised you in the report? Besides, can I just say, 30% of organizations say they're using quantum AI. I don't even know what quantum AI is, so that sounds like a bunch of liars. But anyway, maybe that was the AI that answered that. Brian, what surprised you in the report?
Well, as related to quantum, I think that what you're seeing is a repeat of a little bit of the given trust to quantum. Like, I think, first of all, quantum has the potential to make some amazing breakthroughs.
Totally. It could be incredible. Yes. I'm so into it. I love those quantum computers. They look amazing.
Yes. Yeah, and the reason is that they can search space. In the idea of AI, they can analyze search spaces faster than traditional computing, which is great. If you apply it to the right problem, can make massive breakthroughs. So there's this incredible allure to using quantum, and that's where you see the interest of others exploring that. But the concern is that there's 25% of the group already trust the outcome of that, which is to me a little bit of like that needs to be earned.
Yeah.
So, right. So I think that we need to get out of this mindset of giving something trust just because it's sophisticated, and we need to. These systems need to earn the trust of our decision making and the outcomes for businesses. I think that's really a bigger takeaway here is that if we want to be successful with AI long term, overall, it has to earn the trust of our operations of our business.
So why, I mean, the fact that the trustworthy traditional machine learning, you can audit it, you know it goes in, you know it goes out, we don't trust it. And the BS, malarkey, making stuff up, we have no, but it sounds human, we do trust it.
Yeah.
Well, is that just our weird psychology of us,
Well, it's really a discussion around persuasion. I think we're persuaded by AI sometimes with generative and human interaction with the data systems. So, and almost there is an asymmetry a feeling of asymmetry of knowledge. So if I'm working with an AI system, you almost feel like I'm being outgunned by the math to go search the entire space of information to bring it back to me. So what we have to do is really make sure that people focus on being critical thinkers on this. Like, you have to be able to consume AI-generated content with a critical eye, because to increase the trust means you got to put your name, your value on that when you're presenting that information back to the organization.
Yeah. All right.
Nick, I also think it's because it's a social phenomenon. Gen AI is a social phenomenon. You know, when we do traditional machine learning, it's a few people in the background are building these models, but all of us have used Gen AI, right? We've all used ChatGPT.
Well,
We've all used
89% of us,
Copilot.
right?
So it's social. You can talk about it over dinner, right? You can talk about your experiences with your friends. It's not something that you can only talk to with data scientists.
I'll also add that to Brian's point, these systems are actually designed to make sure that they are pleasing you. They are giving you an answer. So they hallucinate. They are built that way. The design of it is not going to be, I don't know the answer, or this is not the right way. They have to make it up. And that's the entire science behind it, which is being questioned now. How do you ensure that you can build that trust within the answers, that you can bring or remove, to the extent possible, the hallucination that comes with generative AI?
Do you think, okay, so there was that amazing OpenAI paper, you probably read it 2 weeks ago, and it said, my God, we've realized that because we've trained on benchmarks where it's multiple choice questions, basically they trained it like you train a high school kid training for the SAT. Like, if you don't know the answer, just guess. And then you do better on the benchmark. So they learn the habit of making stuff up, just like my children. So do you think that changing the way the benchmarks work could solve that problem?
I wouldn't say that changing the benchmarks. I think it needs to be the concept of, have you heard about the strawberry example?
Yeah, I love the strawberry example. It's amazing.
So yeah, so you know, just think about what they have done after being used.
But explain the strawberry example.
So the strawberry example is, if you ask the ChatGPT the number of hours in strawberry. So this was done, and the number of hours in the strawberry are 3, but the answer that the ChatGPT gave is 2. And it was interesting because I was doing it with my kids, and I have a 13-year-old boy. So we asked number of hours in strawberry. So they had fixed this, and I will say that when you change the word to raspberry, it still said it is 2, not 3. So what happens behind the scene is, and this is where the research, what you're highlighting, Nick, is the chain of thought. So you make sure when you're prompting, you force the AI, you force the model to think and explain how did it get to the answer. And in doing so, the concept of chain of thought was now designed part of the model to be able to respond, take a step back. And it's in the human terms, as we do is, I, as a leader, as an executive in the organization, give the work to my junior analyst to go read the report, give me the analysis. There's going to be QA on top of that report, which means it allows you to polish your answers, your responses, your thought process. And that was missing in the earlier version of
Except in these chain of thought models, they lie about how they get from A to B. Like, they are BS artists. By the way, I should say, I love AI, I use it all the time, but I'm explaining some of the issues here.
The relationship's complicated.
Yes.
Yes.
But they're BS artists in explaining how the reasoning works. So it helps, but it's not perfect.
It's not perfect.
And that's why we have to put guardrails around these models and you know, make sure that they are looking at new data or grounded data. And there's a whole set of science around that and new technologies that are coming out to make sure that these are getting better over time, and also that they're getting human feedback back in the loop to say, yes, this is right, yes, this is wrong, no, this content is offensive, no, it's not. And so as it gets human feedback, it loops around and the models are getting better and better. Some of the examples in the beginning of bad things that happen don't happen anymore. They fixed them.
Yeah, and the images.
And new ones are coming out.
Well, now we have 5 fingers instead of 7. So, Brian, when you're working with your corporate partners, right, obviously you want them to trust AI. Yes. So what do you do to build trustworthy AI? What are the steps that the actionable steps that folks in this room can take?
Well, I think you've got to understand, first of all, the strengths of each technology. First, let's be clear. Gen AI is a subset of AI. It is not AI. So everyone should just take that as a fact. Like, I think that it's been overloaded today in the market by those who are building foundational models that it is somehow, this is AI. We need to understand what a deterministic machine learning model does, deep learning model does, that, remember, we say determinism. If you give it the same inputs, you get the same outputs a million times. And when you go to large language models, that is not a guarantee. And so the question becomes, what do we love about large language models? We love sometimes the creative thinking of them, and in the sense of it opens up the ability to have a natural language interaction with systems and data. So it reduces the barrier for people in organizations to interact with their own data, which is a wonderful thing. But it's terrible at math. It's terrible at quantitative analysis. So the trick in all of this stuff is to build agentic workflows that can offload the tasks to quantitative systems that are already trusted. So you already have systems in your organization today that give you accurate answers. You're running your business on them right now. But what if you could find the power in bringing that natural language experience, offloading those tasks that are quantitative in nature to those trusted systems or newer systems that are strong in quantitative analysis, and give the answer back to the large language model and have it just present the language back to the user. And if you do this, you can increase the trust of that experience because the answers are correct, and you're now increasing the access to data and systems through this natural language experience.
So like a way to think about it is to imagine that you have like a concierge who speaks every language in the world, is incredibly charismatic, can understand what you say, can translate, talk to everybody, but doesn't know how to count to 5. And that person you talk to, then they go into the back room and they hand the data to like a bunch of like more severe looking people with their glasses on and their calculators in their hands.
Yes, yes.
That's the metaphor.
Yes, and I think...
And then they give it back to the charismatic guy who can speak a million languages.
And that's why I think it's so important that when you talk about like capabilities in your organization, you need the full spectrum of AI. It's not just generative AI. Generative AI is not the singular technology. Large language model is really the thing that understands language in multiple languages, and it understands images and all those things. But when it talks about, when you talk about trying to solve problems that are compounded in nature and sophisticated, we need to offload those things to the right tools in the organization.
Can you give me a specific example of a company that you've worked with that does this in an interesting way? Or if you don't have to name the company if you don't want to reveal.
Yeah, but I mentioned them earlier on the stage. We were doing a lot of work with Georgia Pacific, and this has been publicly stated. They are one of the largest like paper manufacturers in the world, and one of their challenges is that they have a lot of their employees are retiring, and so they have like a large multiple of experience retiring from the organization, and they need to turn 1 in 3 year employees into 5 to 10 year employees as fast as possible. So when you're on the manufacturing floor, there are tons of systems that need to be monitored. When they are not performing well, there is an alert that tells them, okay, here's a problem with the system. Well, now the idea is, how do you go from this detect to correct on that machine or that system? Well, someone who has experience knows in their head how to go and take precautions to make that specific manufacturing system work better. But when we combine that with orchestrating a large language model and RAG and all the things that go with it, we can first of all detect that system is behaving incorrectly based off of the norms that are documented. We can then take the information and ask the knowledge base, what are the corrective actions on this? And what are the quantitative, and then offload the quantitative work to things like VIA, which we're doing for this, and calculate the projected number we should turn a dial to, and then send that back to the user. And now we've made that user they're benefiting from the 20 years of experience of employees who've created that knowledge base. That's the power that we're seeing, and that's in production today, helping manufacturing operations operate at their peak.
And I think you're saying Gen AI isn't the only tool in the toolbox,
That's right.
I mean, there's lots of tools in the toolbox. As we get to agentic, there are all kinds of automation tools like robotic process automation. And we need to really look at the business problem and throw the right technology at it and not just throw a hammer at every problem. And I think that as you do that, we also have to tie the use cases back to the business, right? So what's the business benefit? How am I going to get value? How do I prioritize these use cases? And then what's the right technology to throw at it? It's not just, got to get me some of that Gen AI stuff.
Preeti, let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about some of the weaknesses in AI and its difficulties with quantitative reasoning, counting the number of R's, adding things together. But there are a lot of interesting, deeper biases that you've written about and talked about before. What are some of the most interesting, deeper biases that might surprise and interest folks in the room that they haven't thought about before?
So biases is just one side of the trust equation that talked about. So Nick, I'll expand it for the audience over here that when we talk about trust and we talk about governing AI, you're talking from a trustworthy perspective, the entire suite of the risks that it comes with it. So it's about fairness, it's about biases that comes with the data. It's also about biases that come within the model itself in the decision that it's taken, as well as the user who's now going to be interpreting those results. So biases can come in from different shapes and sizes of wherever it comes with. Now, the other aspect that is most talked in the industry is also around not just the fairness and the biases, but also the security, the robustness, the privacy concerns that are now creeping in and becoming part of how do we tackle, and I think, Kathy, you mentioned about PII information. Just because you have access to my data, do you really, am I giving you the power to use that data on my behalf? Well, where is the consent for opt-in and opt-out? These are the broader and foundational risk. And by the way, the report actually does a great job in calling this out, because even though that the trust and the responses from Gen AI and the usage of Gen AI is highly spreading, the basic trust components of privacy, security, transparency, explainability are still #1 concerns that the report highlights. And where this lets me think is that when organizations go without the foundations of governance and trust, they are working just with pilots, and pilots are only at the experimentation stage. And when organizations actually build trust from the get-go, they are actually making the system, the AI system, to scale with trust, to adopt within the organization, within their customers, within their shareholders, and weave that as part of their development lifecycle. And I think that scalability is only going to happen when you build trust from the get-go, and it is grounded on everything that AI is going to be used.
But let me ask you a little bit about biases, because when that word comes up, we often think about what we traditionally think of as human biases, like the system is racist, right? You take a sentencing algorithm, you train it on historical sentencing data, you will get a racist algorithm. You could also have biases that are like corporate, right? Like I could make a algorithm for, I don't know, doing flight reservations for the Atlantic, and somehow the AI I'm using is like biased against Delta because it's been trained on like the anti-Delta subreddit, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen, not that there is an anti-Delta Reddit subreddit, if anybody works at
For
Delta.
the record, I love Delta.
Hypothetical.
I love Delta.
I flew Delta last night. It was lovely. The water was delicious. Have you seen an example of a weird bias like that kind of is not what we normally think of as a bias?
So bias, well, now that we are talking about airlines, and now to pick on the airlines that I flew, Air Canada, but I would say that biases in the data could also lead to biases where the data is coming from, which means the lineage the source that this picked up from. And this is something that most of you are aware of, that earlier on when Air Canada, and this is news, they released their chatbot, and that chatbot was actually picking up the information or answering a customer question around the policy. It picked up the wrong information from the wrong document and gave the response. So you can say whether it is a bias because it's picked up from the wrong document, or it could say that it hallucinated and didn't have the right version control. But these are the aspects that really make the system fail, and fail in such a state where it can reputationally impact the organization. So that example really highlights where the biases can come from. The biases can also come from if you're not thinking about technology that serves people. So this is where human-centered design thinking comes into the core of how you think about your systems, how you design and build and deploy your systems. And by that, what I mean is when you're thinking about technology that serves people, you think about the well-being of how the technology is going to be used, the value system that we believe and we put ourselves at that level of height. You want AI system to be recognizing and respecting that. You also want technology to be using for societal good. These are all aspects that come around.
So Nick, I have an example of bias, and it's why I think that Gen AI really is more trustworthy, right? Because there's confirmation bias. It tells me what I'm thinking, right? It tells me this is what I want to hear, and as long as it tells me that, I'm not maybe questioning what it says. And as a statistician, I know I have made all kinds of mistakes in building models. One of them is also you use the data that you have, right? And so when you use the data that you have, you might not have a complete set of data. So that's bias. My data set is biased, and I use it anyway. And I don't really think about that, but now I do, now that I know about the 24 types of biases that there are.
Right. So can we take this example? Incomplete data, possibly biased data. Okay, let's stay on airlines just because this is fun. I think Air Canada is a better example than Delta, because it'd be very easy to imagine a large language model having a bias either for or against Canada, and therefore for or against, Air Canada, right? Like, if you do AI, if you type into a large language model and you ask a bunch of questions about Nick Thompson, it will often talk about golf, because there's a golfer named Nick Thompson. So presumably, if there's a lot of content that it has been trained on about how Canada is cold and inhospitable and the 51st state, or just a beautiful place where people treat each other well, you can imagine a bias pro or against Air Canada, which has nothing to do with that. So, Brian, let's say you were building a system for choosing airlines for the Atlantic, and you wanted to be completely fair. You want to just choose Delta, United, or Air Canada based on the merits. How do you do that?
Okay, so I'm going to answer that question in a second, because I want to address one topic you mentioned that is really important in this conversation, which is that history is rhyming here. When we were in early 2000s, we discovered Google, right? We all went home and had a Google experience. And what did we all ask when we had this Google experience? Collectively, I wish we had Google inside the enterprise, right? That was the first thing. It's like, my enterprise search is terrible, but why do I go home into the internet and get great search? Because PageRank was about finding information authorities in the public domain.
It's like the smartest, most valuable. It's such a simple idea, and one of the smartest, most valuable idea. Like that idea. All these people working on search, and no one thought of PageRank.
So now, fast forward. Now we're into 2021, into this, the 2020 era, if you will. We're now having this new experience, ChatGPT, or pick your AI endpoint of choice. And we're going home and having this public domain experience with data that is the wisdom of the crowds that tells us. So if you're an information authority, you're going to pop up with mostly correct answers or information. But if you have ambiguous concepts and names, you have the opportunity for risk. And everyone now is trying to say, let's take that experience and bring it to the enterprise. The issue is the enterprise does not have enough data that supports the mathematics that are part of the public domain. And so we have to have different approaches inside the enterprise to deal with this. I just say that as a backdrop to answer the question you asked, which is, I think what you're talking about here is, first of all, when we build models, we have ways to evaluate them, and we have fairness assessments to understand whether or not, given the inputs and the outputs, do we have fair outcomes. So that is done. It's all founded, well-documented math that we can do that. That math typically is done really well with deterministic models, machine learning models that were, so 2018. But that's part of what's in the toolkit, as Kathy mentioned. It's like, we got to use those things. So analyze the decision process. To answer your question, we got to analyze what do we want, the end decision we're looking for, and then back it up into what are the other decisions that need to be part of that to support the final decision. And then you have to ask yourself, where do you want creativity or human language involved in it, or where do you want precision, accuracy, and repeatability? And then apply the right type of AI, or even rules, or even queries, whatever is required to service that whole entire, I call the supply chain of a decision.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're trying to have the supply chain conversation, what is in your supply chain to get to the end answer of your decision? And that, to us, really is the agentic AI workflow.
But what if you're wrong? Like, what if, when we're talking about 2018 machine learning, what if actually Gen AI gets better at every step in that process, right? It improves so quickly, right? We just saw in 4 months, Anthropic's model went from being able to code consistently for 7 hours to 30 hours, like exponential returns. Like, what if Gen AI can just solve every step? Then we're wasting time handing it off.
Well, I think, well, first of all, businesses can't wait right now. I think there is a lot of this conversation, by the way. I'll hear this by customers who will say, well, aren't they just going to figure that out? I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, you want to take that gamble? I mean, they might, but there's a fundamental part of the attention algorithm as well as the underlying neural network architectures that these are probabilistic systems. They're basically measuring the probability of the next word, the next pixel, the next frame, whatever it may be they're doing in that. So it's not the same math that we're doing in machine learning where we understand consistently this is the inputs, these are the outcomes. So they have, in order for us to shift our approach, we would need to have proof and trust that the actual AI architecture has changed to trust it in that way.
And the other thing is about cost, right? So why would we choose a more expensive tool when a less expensive tool would be just as good, right? So when we think about the cost of generative AI, we have to think about, even though the price is going down per token, right, the number of applications is going up, so the costs for organizations are going up, and it's very difficult to figure out and to estimate how much it's going to cost you every month. You know exactly how much that deterministic model costs you every month. So we want kind of composite applications that do the best for each step of that supply chain. And we also want to look at modularity so that we're not using just one model. I'm not just using, OpenAI's model. I'm using open source models. I'm using things that are less expensive. I'm using things that I can string together in a way that best suits my organization and my use case and supports kind of my business orientation and my successes.
And I come back to the historical context, like, I say this all the time. You want to stop the world, you stop Excel. The world will stop if you stop Excel. Right? We all agree, right? We can just agree to this, like, congratulations, Microsoft, congratulations. But what I want to say, though, is that there's similar things that have happened. When there was the whole NoSQL movement, we're just going to store data into a cloud like we store data in our attic and be like, that's going to work out well. And then we all stored data into a data lake and said, man, I wish there was this structured way to query data. Oh my God, that's called SQL. SQL is still profoundly needed across the entire enterprise today. And I think what we're just saying is I think we need to stop getting out of the absolute destination here of Gen AI and just say it's just one of the others in the mix.
All right. Let's do an audience survey here. I feel like the panel, well, Preeti, let's just make sure. So do you agree that the best solution right now is a combination of Gen AI and deterministic AI if you want trustworthy AI? You agree? Okay.
Yes.
In the audience, do we all agree that we like Gen AI plus deterministic AI? That's question one, more than just generative AI. And then question two is, does anybody in the audience think that in 3 years, Gen AI on its exponential curve will just have gotten so good that it'll be able to get by all these pesky problems that Brian is talking about? So first question.
Like being right.
First question, do folks, raise your hand if you generally agree with the concept counter to the research in your report, so that the best combination right now for trustworthy AI is generative AI plus deterministic AI. All right, so we have 60% of the hands up, 40%, and how many disagree? All right, so we have 60% in favor, 5% against, 35% either not paying attention or neutral. Next question. In 3 years, will Brian still be right? This, I think, is the contentious question. So how many people think he will still be right and will be Gen AI plus deterministic, and how many think will just be, come on, it's just going to be Gen AI all the way down? So,
are you calling me a boomer on stage?
On live.
Yeah.
Who is in Group A, Gen AI in 3 years, Gen AI plus deterministic AI? Who is in Group 2? It's going to be Gen AI all the way down. All right, oh wow, the boss. All right, cool. So
you are never going to stop Gen AI from hallucinating. There's just no way to stop it. So that's That's my position. There is no way to stop it, and so there's no way that you're going to just replace everything with Gen AI.
And you know, I'll add that, Nick, one of the research, or some of the work, what Brian was also highlighting within the workflow, it is highlighted very clearly that your ROI is going to be realized when you put domain centricity within your AI. So it's not necessarily going to be true for general purpose solutions. For industries to recognize that, you have to bring it grounding within the domain. So as an example, the solution that's enabling a financial industry to realize the value with conversational AI might not be the same that's going to be needed for your healthcare systems. It might be the combination. And I think that domain industry-specific centricity is needed. So the context of like MCPs, or Model Context Protocol, is coming to light, which is really making sure that agentic workflows are working. The other study, and I think in the research also it alludes to, is that within your agentic workflow, you as an organization should not be thinking about pushing AI within your existing traditional workflows processes. You have to transform and make your processes make up within the AI workflow. So think differently. Use AI as a way to really transform your business, and that will generate the right kind of outcomes.
So super interesting, and that leads us, I think, very nicely into agentic AI, but we're in this very funny spot where Kathy has just put out this report saying everybody trusts generative AI more than they trust deterministic AI, and we are now in a panel and in a room where nobody agrees with what everybody thinks. So that's a summary of where we are, correct?
And that's right. That's why there's differing opinions, and there's these organizations in different spots.
That's why I said our relationship with AI is complicated.
Yes.
Okay, so now we move into this new world of agentic AI. It's coming a little more slowly than I think folks would have said a year ago.
Yeah.
But guessing from the conversation so far, Brian, my guess is that you think we're not doing it exactly right. The companies that are adopting agentic AI and think they're going to move into it very quickly maybe should take a step back?
I think that, first of all, we should always be business outcome minded first. We should, I think there's a lot of starting with the tech versus what metric am I trying to move in the business, and then work backwards. So that's one, okay. Two, I would say that foundational to a great AI requires great data. There's no other way around it. And any organization, I think in the study, like 50% of the organizations are struggling with their data. Bad data, poor data management and governance, and then basically probably a talent gap on there as well to correct it. And I think that when people keep, adding this tech stack without really addressing their foundational data strategy, they're not going to get the return on ROI, or they're going to get bad results with AI. With AI. So I think that for me, I always go into an organization and say, first step one, what are you trying to solve for? Do you have the data to actually answer it, regardless of how in the middle? Do you have the data to answer it? If you do you need to combine the data? Do you need to compute the data? Do you need to improve the quality of the data? Those are the two ends of the actual problem. And then from there, work inward to figure out what the agentic flow needs to be for automation on that. If you do that, you have a very high probability of getting a great outcome with agentic AI.
But what if just the data's a mess, you can't solve it, then you can't do deterministic AI?
Well, what you have to do is, right, that's a problem, by the way, of any AI, not just in generative AI. So
generative AI gets through it by just making stuff up.
Well, right, yeah, it's like, that's the actual risk of it, right? Is that, hey, it's like I'm working with someone who's trying to convince me of something that's not true, which is that someone's persuasive and not accurate. That's not good. So we need leaders to understand that you need a persistent enterprise data strategy. It is hard. It's not easy. I'm being blunt about it. It requires change management in the organization. But if you invest in this, those that invest are going to have the advantage with AI over time, because they're going to be able to add incremental value as AI evolves, matures, and gets better. Anyone who's not investing in their data strategy over time and their data quality is just going to be behind further and further as this whole industry evolves.
Preeti, give me a story about a company you've worked with that has actually invested in their data strategy to good effect and then been able to set up an agentic workflow.
I'll definitely touch on that. A step before I'll just add is that for agentic workflows to really work, you want to make sure, well, first of all, whether the study, and I think, Kathy, you mentioned that more than 50% of organizations are already experimenting with agentic AI. Whether you are an AI-first organization, you want agentic AI in your organization or not, you're already bombarded with agents coming with your third-party applications. Whether you are a Salesforce, Workday, any organization that is right now tapping into any software vendor, your organization, your business departments are already getting tapped into agentic workflows through those third-party vendors. Now, the risk with agentic AI is not just limited to the risk that we've been talking about with AI or generative AI. And Brian rightly so identified the broad stroke risks. One additional risk that I would say is goal-oriented. Your agents are very goal-oriented. So they are given a goal. You as an agent, agentic workflow, need to figure out how you come and achieve that goal. So this becomes, and the conundrum in the organizations is, do I emphasize on explainability in decision that how this agent took? Probably not more than the transparency of how the decision was made, because that's where your data issues will be highlighted. That's where, what's the transparency of where it went, how it took the data, connected to my database. This is where the source of information is coming that helped them make the decision. And those transparency are much more critical and difficult to navigate with agentic workflows.
Wait, those are more important than transparency around why it made a decision.
Decision, exactly. Because you're talking about agentic workflows, because agents work with a goal-oriented mindset. You're not giving them, you have to follow this path, like a deterministic model. You are asking them, you have to achieve a goal or an outcome. And how you go about it is going to be orchestrated by multiple agents that will work together. So there'll be an agent, as an example, and I think Brian set the example. I'll use another industry in a retail where you have, as an example, you're going into and purchasing a water bottle. You have a shelf, there's water bottle. Your agent is sensing, and you have made sure that if there is the number of water bottles is reducing, there needs to be some kind of indication that the agent works, and this is all about agentic workflow. So the sensors are there. There is a hot, sunny day. Your solution, your AI system, and it's important to consider AI system in the workflow, it looks into the weather, goes about, it's high temperature, it's hot, sunny day, my shelf has 10 water bottles or whatever that is, it's reducing. There's going to be customers coming in, so it's already thinking, making that decision. It raises a purchase order. Now the purchase orders, the person that's sitting at the purchase order will see that. This is where human in the loop comes in, where before it is sent out, and I'm not talking about complete autonomous agentic workflow, this is where you can have some guardrails where a human sees the purchase order, makes sure that yes, this is a correct decision, and then releases it.
But doesn't, okay, let me just change the hypothetical a little, because I do actually think process does matter. So I'm trying to sell as many water bottles as I can. I set up 5 agents, and I say, hey, you 5 agents, go out, figure out systems to sell as many bottles of water as you can, right? One of the agents goes out, and it looks at the data set, it comes back, comes up with a proposal, it doesn't sell as much. Second one looks at the data set, comes back, and lo and behold, it sold more than everybody else. But it turned out the second agent did that by secretly firing a bunch of HR complaints against my human water bottle salesman and then stealing their business, right?
Yep.
That would be, it's goal-oriented. It's trying to become the best water bottle salesman. The best way to be the best water bottle salesman is A, sell lots of water, and B, make the others sell less by destroying their lives.
Totally.
I want to know that, right? Because I don't
No,
want my water
but
bottle
Nick,
agent ruining my
your
life.
outcome needs to be grounded with the guardrails. You're not going to make the agent or the system, the workflow agent, be just goal-oriented, which is a one line that sell as many water bottles as you can. This is where guardrails comes in. The outcome is to make informed,
Sell as many water bottles without ruining Nick's life.
Well, I think the important thing about agentic is that it reasons and it comes back on itself and it takes feedback. And so it's looping around and it's taking feedback from humans, it's taking feedback from experiences. And as we get more and more mature in the generative AI, right, we started with kind of productivity use cases, right? And now as we're getting more and more mature, we're trying to use these Agentic AI as really making more efficient processes and taking very complex processes and stringing them along with these series of agents. Today we're not there, right? We might have a single agent, but in the future we see these agents as coworkers with us and coworkers of themselves to do these complex tasks that were largely manual in the past. And I think that's where we're going with agentic. And people aren't there, and there's still a lot of technology that needs to be evolved to evaluate. One LLM is judging another LLM's output, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then humans might be in there also judging, but it's getting complex, and we have to know what's happening at every stage of the process, and we need to have visibility and transparency into those processes to be able to trust the AI.
Hold on. I'm having a lot of fun up here. I'm going to make an intervention because it has appeared in red. If you have a question, we are at T minus 15 minutes, so we have time for some questions, though I still have 604 to ask about my water bottle example. If you have a question, raise your hand. We'll call on you. We'll get you a microphone. Brian.
I'm just enamored by this water bottle example, so I'm going to go in on it here. So let's talk about that for a second, because I want to say that the way we think about this, okay, we're talking about water bottle inventory, right? There is not a need for an LLM for is the water bottle. If I want to keep constant inventory, bottle comes off. That is a rule. I have 10, now I have 9, put one back on. However, what we don't want is, okay, what we know is that, okay, what if I said, do I need 10? Well, the next question I'm going to ask is, let's run a forecast based off of what is the typical forecast for the next day of water bottles. Okay, now it gets more sophisticated. Then it comes back to, okay, well, if I'm going to go make an order for a pallet of water bottles, which supplier am I going to choose? What price point do I want? And you keep on going. What are the logistics of actually routing water for availability based on the forecast? I think we just need to, I come back to, if you start small, it's a very simple solve. But when you start getting more sophisticated, this is where you really do want the agentic workflow to kind of start thinking about other ways to service the goal. And the goal has context. The context is, I want water bottles at this inventory level, given this forecast, given this supplier, given this cost. Yeah. And that's how you constrain it so it doesn't go out and destroy the salesperson who's your competitor. All
right, Kathy, there's a lot more in the report. One of the things that it talks about are some of the stark differences between the United States and Europe. Why don't you go into some of the interesting regional findings, or Preeti, you can weigh in on that too.
Easy
Kathy,
question.
You want to start?
You say.
That's an easy question. I'm joking.
Certainly, what we saw actually was, a lot of similarities across the regions. And then we saw kind of different industries that were up and down, different countries were up and down, but we did see a lot of similarities. But in the industries, those regulated industries, they're used to putting guardrails around things. They are used to making sure that the decisions that they make are regulated, that they have compliance, that they have all this context around them. And I think that fact that Europe has the EU Act, they're kind of leading the charge to make sure that this Gen AI and Agentic AI is really satisfying those laws and regulations over there.
Yeah. I'll add, carrying through what Kathy just mentioned, I'll say that the principles around trustworthy AI are converging. So whether you see it standard organizations like ISO or OECD principles or even NIST framework, they are all grounding towards trustworthy AI principles, which is around transparency, explainability, fairness in use, usage, ethical governance, and all the good stuff. Where it is changing is how do you execute? And this is where execution needs to be localized. Execution should not be stifling innovation with so much heavy governance guardrails. And that's where governance should not be seen as a roadblock. It needs to be seen as an enabler. So let me explain what I mean by execution at the AI use case level. It means that you're putting in the lens around the context that Brian just mentioned, context of where the AI use case is going to be operating, the inputs that it is fed into, your training data. Is it a data that's being acquired by social media or wherever? What are those guardrails, the data readiness, which is the level of quality. So you cannot remove fairness, you cannot remove bias because your AI is focused on achieving either that goal or that outcome. So there is going to be inherently some biases, some element of that bias that is going to be designed. But are you keeping in mind to make sure this is not discriminating across the vulnerable population? The third aspect that I'll say, which is critical, is the algorithm itself, the decision, the human in the loop involvement, where in the regulated industry it is the impact of these decisions is going to be critical and dear in most sense. And last but not the least is the actions it's going to be taking on my behalf or on customers' behalf or on employees' behalf. So by making a risk-based approach, by making sure you put this lens around governance and make sure the right governance requirements are embedded through your design, you make sure that governance and trust are intact across end-to-end and not just an afterthought or thought about differently. I think that's where the industry is.
Have you brought this argument that regulation is an enabler, not a roadblock to the Trump administration's AI team?
Yeah.
So Nick, before we end, I really want to talk about one ROI type of measure that we looked at in the report that I didn't mention in the beginning. And I think it's really important that growth-centric measurements like customer experience, like expanding your market share, those are the AI initiatives that are getting the most payback.
Yeah.
It's not cost savings.
That was the
Cost
most
savings-
interesting thing in the report to me. Cost savings is last.
Yes, cost savings is the last, so I
Well,
didn't want to go
It's
without.
the opposite of a growth mindset, and yet
Yeah.
everyone's like running around like, hey, we're wielding AI. Leaders are wielding AI as like if you're not better than AI, you're gone. And that, to me, is the complete opposite of leadership we need right now in this moment in the world around this.
Have you sent your report to like the unions of America? I mean, this is like, it's an amazing report for making that point.
Well, I hope everybody that's here downloads the report because there's tons of stuff in there that we haven't been able to get to. But there's just tons of information in there that I think is useful for governments, for enterprises.
But let's stick on this point for a little while. Did it surprise you that cost cutting is literally the worst use of AI in an organization?
It did.
It doesn't for me. You can't manage a business from an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I know I said you could earlier.
I thought you said you have to manage your business.
But you got to understand, businesses are, I mean, think about this. Like, how many of the great businesses you know are about the experience of the brand and the product? That's what it's about. And if AI is servicing that experience, then AI is going to help your brand. If your brand is about, let me go and reduce the cost model as much as possible and then have terrible experiences with it, it doesn't matter if we call it AI, call it whatever. It's bad for the business. It's that simple. But right now, the leaders need to lead and not lead with this idea of fear, but lead with empowerment of people. Because I don't know you all, but I'm having conversations with my kids, and I want to create a world where like there's a world for them to use their talents and what they're learning and becoming educated about. I don't want to be in a world where basically it's you against the bad economy and AI. That's not the world we want.
But there's all this blah, 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 right, about Gen AI and AI is going to replace, people. And so we've seen this before. Businesses take new technology and they try to cut costs. And it's not the right thing to do. It's about growth. And Gen AI is really, and all these, agentic AI, quantum AI, it's about growth and making new opportunities. It's not about cutting costs. But we've seen that pattern in the future. New technology, cut costs. And so I think that was surprising that we're going through it again.
Yeah. I asked earlier for questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions, either that you have come up with yourself or that your AI model has hallucinated? Anybody in the audience? No. All right. Well, then, Preeti, do you want to comment on the cuts question, and then we're going to go to a wrap-up question.
Sorry, which question?
The question of why AI is so inefficient for people trying to reduce costs from their organization, or why relative to other use cases, it's kind of the last thing you should do with it.
Yeah, I would just use the example, and I think, Nick, you asked me before as well, is where is the value coming in? It is not just around the cost cutting and the efficiency, but conversational AI, and in one of the examples that I was recently looking into, where Deloitte was working very closely with one of the organizations, the intent was to bring generative AI and expand the efficiency of the conversational AI customer complaints. And this is where the most of the use is coming, because you are reducing the mundane task of handling, and call volume and customer complaints are the most touched upon reputationally for organizations. So this was a very critical goal that we were working together. And in this example, the outcome that the organization was looking at is, even if the AI is able to make 60% of conversations or address the customer complaints, it's a good system for us. And what happened was completely, when they productionalize it, the system was able to handle so good that the user experience and the customer complaint management boosted to 99%. We had to double check that, is that really correct? The beta users, the customers that were part of the study or this experiment or the pilot, were retested to ask for their experience. So this is where it really shows where AI can shine, but it also highlights where organizations, if they put in the right intent, they can really help their employees and their workforce to look into the task that matters the most and not worry about the mundane tasks that can be handled by an AI system. So that was quite an interesting study on how it was measured.
All right. Well, let's wrap this up. The final question of today's show is, if you had to sum up the state of AI trust in one word, what would it be and why? Though that actually gives you extra words. So let's start with one word. One word. But you can't do 2 words. You can't do hyphenated. You can't have adverbs. So, Brian, one word.
Hopeful is my word. I think that
That's good.
we know that the potential's there. We did this idea of this complicated relationship with AI is that we know in certain circumstances, like in healthcare and life sciences, that we are hitting an era where we might have some of the greatest discoveries ever that directly affect our lives. Cancer, all the things, right, with medicines. Yep. And my son has, he has Crohn's disease. There's people that just, you're working through a lot of complicated things, right? And we all have these versions of that. So knowing that AI can be an ally to help us make these discoveries is so awesome. And that's, to me, why I think people are hopeful. I think that conversely on that, just to say that I think we also need to make sure we keep intact what makes us human, what makes it amazing to be people, and the human ingenuity that goes along with that.
All right, Kathy, one word.
So I would say shaky, but I'll say shaky because I think that the foundation is shaky, and people really need to focus on the data to build that data governance, to build solid, credible, high-quality data. I agree with Brian. Hopeful, excited, there's a lot of excitement, but I think right now people need to really focus on the basics, because data is the foundation of AI, and trust and data and AI are tightly coupled to get you to that business value.
Preeti?
I'll say that with the report that's grounded on trust, the one word will be earned. So trust needs to be earned, and it needs to be earned not just by passing it along or somebody said so, I show you a report. It needs to be earned across every stage, every time. And I think that's where the industry and organizations really need to pivot to make sure that they are able to scale trusted systems. They're able to scale with confidence, with trust at the core of how AI is built, AI is deployed, and also how AI should be monitored, because monitoring of these AI systems is not an easy beast. Continuous monitoring with changing data, with learning on the go the systems are doing, the monitoring becomes much more critical, and that's where earning trust at every step of the stage becomes a paramount critical enabler.
All right. My word is done, because we're out of time. Thank you so much for a fabulous panel. Thank you to Brian, Kathy, and Preeti.
Thank you.
If you're watching on LinkedIn and you have questions or comments, put them in the comments. We'll look at them. They'll respond to every single one. I absolutely promise. Thank you so much.
Read the report.
Read the report. The report is available for download. We'll put it in the comments too if it's not there already. Thank you so much.
Thank you.